Imagine this scenario. Your loved one has gone missing and you're frantically trying to find them. And one day they are found, and as you're so excited to see them, the worst thing happens. You see them, and they're not your loved one that you've been looking for after all. And when you finally tell authorities this, they think you're crazy, actually crazy enough to throw you into an asylum. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crime and Wine. My name is Ariana, or Ari to the YouTube fam, and I cover true crime cases that have inspired the making of movies. I'm super excited for today's case, and I just want to say thank you guys for all the support you've shown me on my social and here on YouTube. So I'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe and leave a comment at the end of this video. So let's get into today's case. So today's case, we will be taking a look at the true crime case that has inspired the movie, The Changeling. Many of you may know of this movie already. It stars Angelina Jolie, John Malkovich, Jeffrey Donovan, and some really other great actors. This movie is focused in 1928 in Los Angeles, and it's about a single mother, Christine Collins, played by Angelina Jolie. She arrives home one day to find her son, Walter, gone. 5 months later, her prayers are answered when Walter is found in Illinois, but to her horror, the boy who steps off the train is not her son. Authorities try to dispute Christine's claim, and there's only one person, who's the clergyman, who actually is trying to help her to expose the police department and the corruption of the authorities. So Christine Collins was born in 1888 as Christina Ida Dune. She married a man by the name of Walter J. Collins, but to her surprise, when they got married, she did not know that he had a past and he was actually an ex-convict. It's somewhat related to the case, so we'll get into that a little bit later, but in September of 1918, they ended up having a son, which they also named Walter, or Walter Jr. And the family, they lived in Los Angeles, California. Walter Jr. disappeared at the age of 9 years old on March 10th of 1928 after his mother, Christine, gave him money to go to the movies. He was last seen around 5:00 p.m. by a neighbor at the corner of Pasadena Avenue and North Avenue 23 in Lincoln Heights, Los Angeles. At the time of him being missing, his father was actually incarcerated at Folsom State Prison since actually 1923 for armed robbery, and Walter's father thought that the former inmates were responsible for his son's disappearance in an attempt to get revenge at him. Apparently he worked at the prison's cafeteria, and he was kind of like a spy. He was reporting on other inmates' wrongdoings inside the prison. So it's safe to say he had a lot of enemies. So when his son went missing, he immediately thought, someone's doing this for revenge against me. Long story short, nothing came out of that scenario, but he did end up passing away not too long after this in the state prison, where he was buried in the cemetery. So while Walter at this time wasn't the only child that went missing, he was the only one that received nationwide media attention, which actually brought media attention onto other missing children that were also involved in this case, such as Nelson and Louis Winslow, who were 10 and 12 years old. They both went missing on their way home to Pomona, California on May 16th of 1928. Their parents had actually received strange letters from them. The first letter said that they were heading to Mexico, and then the second one said that they were planning to stay missing as long as they can to become famous. So at the time, the police didn't connect these two disappearances together at first, the brothers and Walter's case, and they also didn't find a connection between these three cases and another case of a, quote, headless body of a Latino boy that they found in La Puente earlier in February. And with none of these connections made, a neighbor had actually made a complaint about a man mistreating a boy at his poultry farm But that also didn't appear to be relevant either. And I'm sure you're probably thinking that little side fact does not seem relevant, as I am talking about missing children and a man having a complaint about his poultry farm. But we'll get into that later. The search for Walter continued for 5 months, all while tons of reports flooded in of possible sightings from across the state, such as San Francisco, Oakland, and the town of Glendale, where apparently an attendant at a gas station claimed to have seen him in the back seat of a car wrapped in newspaper from the neck down. But ultimately, nothing came more out of these sightings. The police would end up facing very negative publicity and increasingly public pressure to have this case solved, which I personally think that the movie does a great job in portraying this. That's a main fact in the movie that you'll see. Because 5 months later, after the disappearance of Walter, a boy claiming to be Walter was found in DeKalb, Illinois. Letters and photographs were exchanged between Christine Collins and this boy before she ended up paying for the boy to be brought to LA. In the hope that all the negative publicity would go away, the police organized a public reunion for the mother and son. I don't know how often we do that now, but I don't know, it's a little strange, but it's said that they had hoped that this uplifting human interest story would deflect the attention from a series of corruption scandals that the department was already facing at this time. At the reunion, Christine Collins claimed that the boy was not Walter. I think a mother would be able to immediately notice if that's her son or not after 5 months. She was told, though, by the officer in charge of the case, who was Police Captain J.J. Jones, to take the boy home to, quote, try him out for a couple of weeks, which Christine actually agreed to do. I kind of find that to be a little funny because it's not like he's a mattress or a couch of some sort that they're gonna test run for a week. But anyways, Christine just couldn't shake the fact that she knew this boy was not her son, which she would end up telling the police again, going down to the police department telling them, here, take him, this is not my son. And even though she had dental records to prove that this boy was not her son, Police Captain J.J. Jones had Christine committed to the psychiatric ward at the Los Angeles County Hospital under a Code 12, which I guess at this time it was a term they used to jail or commit someone or admit someone who was deemed difficult or an inconvenience. Other reports I've read have said that Captain Jones admitted Christine on the basis that she just didn't want to take care of her son anymore, which I find that to be so absurd because why would she bring all this media attention to find her son who she's been looking for just for him to finally get home and then her say, oh no, this isn't my son? That doesn't make sense. Of course it doesn't. But anyways, she ended up being kept under evaluation for 10 days, during which this time the boy actually admitted that he was not the real Walter Collins. So this boy actually admitted to being 12-year-old Arthur Hutchins Jr., who was a runaway from Iowa. He was picked up by the police in Illinois, and when they asked him if he was Walter Collins, at first he said no, but then he ended up saying yes because he said that the reason why is that he posed as Walter Collins was so he could get to Hollywood, so he can meet his favorite actor, Tom Mix. I mean, I guess the kid was pretty smart in a way. He did get all the way from Illinois to LA with all expenses paid, but nevertheless, what a horrible thing for Christine to have experienced. Imagine just being labeled as crazy and thrown into a psychiatry asylum just because, of course, you'd know that's not her own son. And for this kid to just knowingly lie this whole time, I mean, that is a bit irritating, especially towards the police. And of course, you would know Walter was 9 years old when he went missing. This boy was 12. There should have been an obvious difference. Interestingly, though, Christine would later win a lawsuit she had against Captain Jones in which she was awarded $10,800, or in today's money, it would be $16,000. But Captain Jones, he never paid that to her though. So now you're probably wondering, what really happened to the real Walter Collins? Well, let's first start the discussion with a man named Gordon Stewart Northcott. Gordon was born in Bladsworth, Saskatchewan, and raised in British Columbia. He moved to Los Angeles with his parents in 1924. He had asked his father if they could purchase a piece of land in Wineville, California, or you may know of this town as Mira Loma, California, as of today, so that they could build a house and a chicken ranch. Since his father was in the construction business, he agreed and they had began the building process. Gordon had actually reached out to his sister, who lived in Canada at the time, and asked her if her son Sanford Clark could come from Canada to California to help them with the building of the house and the chicken ranch. Sounds pretty innocent enough, or was it? It turned out, though, that this was just an evil and awful plan to get Sanford there to begin abusing him. Sanford ended up playing a huge role in this case, and he would be the reason why Gordon would be eventually caught. Sanford would write home, and his letters had become very concerning to his sister, Jessie, so concerning that she decided to visit her little brother Sanford in Wineville, which she did, but it didn't take long at all upon arriving in Wineville at Gordon's home, where she began to learn that Gordon was abusing Sanford. She quickly left back home and immediately told her mother, Winifred Clark, which she then alerted the LAPD. On August 31st, 1928, the police in Los Angeles sent immigration officers to check on Sanford, which they found Sanford and Gordon's father, where they ended up taking both of them into custody. It's said that at the time that the officers were at Gordon's house, Gordon and his mother were driving down the road at this time, and as soon as they saw the police, they booked it and went back, or at least tried to go back to Canada. While Sanford was awaiting deportation, he just couldn't hold it in anymore, and he ended up telling the police everything from him getting abused by Gordon to how he was kidnapping other little boys and abusing them also. He even told the police, now get this guys, because this part's super crazy, he even told the police that Gordon and Gordon's mother killed some of the boys and had even forced Sanford to murder some of them alongside of them as well. The cops went on to show Sanford photographs of several of the missing boys, and unfortunately, he was able to identify Nelson Lewis Winslow, the two boys we discussed earlier, where their mother received strange letters from, and unfortunately, he also identified Walter Collins. He also told the police that Gordon, quote, kept a Mexican boy in the chicken coop and killed him too. This would have been the same child that the police found 7 months prior to Sanford telling them this in the town of La Puente. Both Gordon and his mother were arrested on September 20th of 1928 in British Columbia, Canada. They were extradited to Riverside County, California just 3 weeks later. There was so much back and forth from Gordon, where he first would say that he killed as many as 9 boys, and then he would later switch the story and saying that he only killed, quote, the Mexican, which, guys, for the record, I feel really sad and that they never identified this child, unlike the other ones, and it's unfortunate, and especially because he was only referred to as the Mexican. So I apologize that I keep quoting that, but as in the documents and websites, that's how they refer to him as. Gordon had a cocktail of different stories he would make up, such as saying that his father killed all the kids, and then saying that he knows nothing about the killings of the young boys, and he would even claim that he had an incestuous relationship with his mother, and that his father was sexually abusing him as a child. Gordon, though, would end up being labeled as a pathological liar, so nothing he said could really be taken in serious, and only the evidence and the facts would convict him. Thanks to Sanford, though, he took full responsibility for the role that he played in this whole ordeal, and he actually led the investigators to the burial sites on Gordon's property. What they found was just so extremely sad and upsetting. They dug up holes that contained some bones of bodies, and they found other type of evidence around and inside the chicken coop, such as a possible murder weapon, of an axe, bloodstains, human hairs, and not so coincidentally, they also found notepads that happened to match, if you remember from earlier, those letters written to the Winslow brothers' parents. With this evidence, they were finally able to convict Gordon of the murder of the Winslow brothers and, again, the Mexican. And even the crazier part of this trial was that Gordon's mother, Sarah Lewis Northcott, would testify that she also took part in the killings of Walter Collins, in which her final blow would be the one to have killed him. But Sanford actually said otherwise. Gordon was sentenced to death, and his mother, Sarah, was sentenced to a life sentence. And if you're wondering about Gordon's father, Cyrus George Northcott, it's said that while he also lived in the same household and on the same property, he said he knew nothing about everything that came to light. He didn't know about his wife's involvement or what his son did or was doing, but after everything came out, it's said that he was extremely helpful with the police in answering questions or showing them around the property or in any way that he could. Of course, this is so sad because poor Christine refused to believe that Walter was dead, and not just dead, but was murdered. So when Gordon refused to admit he killed Walter, Christine believed him, and she even backed him up in court, saying that he didn't kill him, in spite of the evidence showing the high likelihood that he probably did. Maybe to some of you guys this is an upsetting fact because it just seems likely, considering that he's already abused and killed other children. And maybe, some of you might think, why would she even back him up in any way or under any circumstance? But on the other hand, it's a really pitiful situation because she would much rather believe that he didn't murder and abuse her child than to admit that he did. Nonetheless, though, that's a pretty crazy fact of the story. But let me know in the comments what you think about that, though. Gordon went on to serve a bit of time in San Quentin prison, but he was put to death at age 23 by hanging on October 2nd of 1930, and his final words were, quote, "A prayer, please, say a prayer for me." And his mother, Sarah, would end up dying in prison from old age. And as for Sanford, while he wasn't convicted for any of the crimes, he did get sent to a boys' correctional facility where he served 23 months in there and then was deported back to Canada. I did find that later in his life he served in World War II, and then he worked for 28 years for the Canadian Postal Service. He did go on to get married, and him and his wife June adopted and raised 2 sons. They were married for 55 years, and they were involved in many different organizations. Sanford Clark died in 1991 at age 78. Christine Collins would spend the remaining of her days, 36 years to be exact, searching for her son Walter Collins, which she never found. A bit of an interesting fact about this case is that because of this case, Wineville, California was later changed to Mira Loma, California, which is what we know of it as of today, because they wanted to distance themselves from this horrific case. And exactly how did Gordon abduct these children? Well, I think it's safe to say he used a variety of tactics, but one of the main ones was just giving these boys false promises that since he owned a chicken farm, there would be plenty of work for them to do and to get paid for the older kids that may have been running away from home or trying to make it on their own. And during this time, it was typical. And then for the younger ones, he'd offer the concept of an adventure that they could partake in. So anyways, guys, this case, it's really sad when you think about it and when you look back at, Christine Collins and everything that she went through, from losing her child, pleading with police and the media, the police not really wanting to help her find her son in a sense, and then making her believe or treating her like she was crazy and throwing her in an asylum because she knew that her 9-year-old son was not this 12-year-old son that they brought from Illinois, with proof of his dental records and all. So And it's really sad. And then, of course, you hear this notorious killer who did all these awful things to these children, and he didn't get away with it, which is great. But it's still unfortunate that Christine, just till the day she died, she wouldn't believe that her son was murdered or abused in any form or sense, and the fact that she still felt that because his body was never found, he could still be alive and could have still been out there. So it's just an unfortunate case all the way around. It's a shocking case. It's an upsetting case. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining me back here for another episode of Crime and Wine. If you enjoyed today's case, then it would mean so much to me if you leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below and tell me your thoughts or a possible true crime story that you know of that has been made into a movie. Or inspired the making of a movie. I would love to look into it and possibly cover it in one of my next cases. Also, head over to my Instagram. I would love to connect with you there. Give me a follow, and you'll also see a wine review of the wines that you may see in the background. I do some, reviews on the wine and some things that you should know about this month's wine. So thank you guys again, and I'll see you guys back here next week for another episode of Crime and Wine.